Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little gray cells unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we transport you to the quaint yet shadowed village of Clockhaven, nestled in the misty hills of rural England in the year 1928. A time when the gears of progress turned amid the echoes of tradition. Chapter 1. The Toll of Midnight. In the year 1928, the village of Clockhaven, nestled in the shadowed folds of rural England's mist-laden hills, a place where time seemed to linger like an uninvited guest. The village, with its crooked lanes and half-timbered cottages, lay under the watchful gaze of the Clockmaker's tower, a Gothic edifice of weathered stone, its spire thrusting into the heavens like a needle poised to stitch the fabric of eternity. The tower's great bell, a sonorous giant forged in the days of Cromwell, told the hours with a resonance that trembled through the cobblestones, as though reminding all of Clockhaven that time was both master and executioner. On this autumn evening, a relentless drizzle cloaked the village in a melancholy veil, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The wind, fitful and petulant, whispered through the skeletal branches of ancient oaks, carrying murmurs of secrets best left buried. Gas lamps flickered feebly along the high street, their golden glow swallowed by the encroaching fog, which curled like spectral fingers around the tower's iron filigree. It was a night for firesides and locked doors. Yet within the Clockmaker's tower, a tragedy was unfolding, its echoes destined to reverberate far beyond the midnight hour. Elias Thorne, the master clockmaker, was a man of 60, whose life had been as precise as the mechanisms he crafted. His countenance, etched with the furrows of relentless dedication, bore the stern dignity of one who had wrested order from the chaos of time. His hair, silvered from the world beyond the tower's stone walls. Yet as the great bell tolled midnight, its mournful clang reverberating through the spiral staircase that wound like a coiled spring to the tower's apex, a cry shattered the stillness. A guttural gasp, raw with desperation, that seemed to claw its way from the workshop's depths. The sound, though fleeting, pierced the night like a shard of glass, startling the rooks that nested in the tower's eaves into a cacophony of protest. By the time the bell's echo faded, silence had reclaimed the tower, but it was a silence pregnant with dread. It was young Jack Hargrove, Thorne's apprentice, who discovered the body. Jack, a lanky youth of 22 with a shock of dark hair and eyes that burned with the smoldering resentment of unfulfilled ambition, had been roused from his cot in the tower's attic by the cry. Descending the staircase, his boots clattering on the worn stone, he entered the workshop to find his master slumped over the workbench, his fingers curled around an ornate pocket watch, its face frozen at 11:58. Thorne's lips were tinged blue, his eyes staring blankly into the void, as though time itself had betrayed him. A faint glitter like frost on a winter morn dusted the watch's brass hands, a residue that would later be identified as curare, a rare and deadly poison that had paralyzed his lungs, mimicking the symptoms of a natural apoplexy. The village awoke to the clamor of alarm, and by dawn Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard had arrived, his bluff features furrowed with the consternation of a man accustomed to simpler crimes. Japp, a stout figure in a rumpled overcoat, surveyed the workshop with a mixture of skepticism and unease, his mustache twitching as he muttered, "A queer business, this. Poison in a clock. Devilish clever, if you ask me." His heavy boots left muddy prints on the flagstones, a careless intrusion into the sanctity of Thorne's domain. It was then that Hercule Poirot, summoned by a frantic telegram from Thorne's gaze, lingered on the pocket watch, its stopped hands a silent accusation. The mechanism. It is not merely a tool of death, but a witness. We must listen to its story. He knelt beside the workbench, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the residue, careful not to disturb the evidence. His attention shifted to a torn scrap of crimson velvet fabric, no larger than a shilling, lying in the dust near the body. It was a stark contrast to the workshop's muted tones, its richness suggesting a garment of some expense. Nearby, a trail of muddied footprints, indistinct and overlapping, led from the door to the workbench, hinting at an intruder, or perhaps a deliberate misdirection. The suspects emerged like figures from a fog-shrouded tableau, each drawn to the tower by the grim news. First was Amelia Thorne, the widow, a woman of 40 whose elegance belied her grief. Her porcelain features, framed by chestnut curls, were composed, yet her hands trembled as she clutched a lace handkerchief. Her mourning black accentuated her pallor, but her eyes, a deep hazel, flickered with a suppressed intensity, an ambition stifled by years of living in her husband's shadow. Psychologically, she was a study in restraint, her composure a dam holding back a flood of unspoken desires. "My husband was a genius, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but brittle, but solitary. He had enemies, yes, but who would stoop to such barbarity? Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, lingered in the doorway, his lanky frame slouched with a mix of defiance and unease. His hands, calloused from years of labor, fidgeted with a screwdriver, betraying a nervous energy. His psychological profile revealed a young man chafing under Thorne's autocratic rule, his dreams of partnership crushed by relentless criticism. Master Thorne was a tyrant, he later confessed to Poirot, his voice low with bitterness. Promised me the world, then treated me like a cog in his machine. Reginald Blackwood, Mr. Simmons, the butler, was a study in stoic loyalty, his silver hair and impeccable livery masking a life of quiet desperation. Aged 55, his lined face and steady hands suggested a man who had seen much, but spoken little. Psychologically, he was torn between duty and suppressed resentment, his loyalty to the Thorne family frayed by years of ingratitude. "I served faithfully, sir," he said to Poirot, his voice a measured monotone. "Master Thorne was demanding." Finally, Dr. Lavinia Croft, a scholarly woman of 45, arrived from a nearby guest house. Her wire-rimmed spectacles and severe bun gave her an air of intellectual authority, but her piercing blue eyes hinted at a smoldering grievance. Her psychological profile revealed a mind as sharp as a scalpel, nursing a decades-old wound from Thorne's plagiarism of her father's work. "He ruined my family," she said coolly, her voice a blade sheathed in velvet. "But murder? That is a question for your little gray cells, monsieur." Poirot paced the workshop, his cane tapping rhythmically against the flagstones, each step a metronome measuring the pulse of the mystery. The clues were tantalizing. The crimson fabric, the muddied footprints, the stopped watch contradicting the tower's midnight toll. A vial of curare residue, discarded in the dustbin, suggested premeditation, but its fingerprints were smudged beyond recognition. The psychological undercurrents were equally compelling. Amelia's suppressed ambition, Jack's simmering resentment, Blackwood's envious bluster, Eliza's secretive defiance, Simmons's stoic cracks, and Lavinia's cold fury. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the workshop's oppressive air. "This is no mere crime of passion. It is a mechanism, intricate and deliberate, wound by a hand that knows the heart of this tower. The little gray cells, they are already at work." As the drizzle thickened outside, casting the tower in a shroud of gray, the stage was set for crime was as Thorne had left it. His body, now covered with a sheet at Inspector Japp's insistence, lay slumped over the workbench, the ornate pocket watch still clutched in his stiffened fingers. Its face, stopped at 11:58, was a silent enigma, defying the tower's great bell which had tolled midnight with unyielding authority. The faint glitter of curare residue on the watch's hands gleamed under the gas lamp's wavering light. A deadly frost that had snuffed out life with clinical efficiency. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, darted from the watch to the surrounding clutter. Springs, cogs, and pendulums scattered like the detritus of a life devoted to time's mastery. "Mon ami Japp," Poirot said, his voice a measured cadence. "This workshop, it is a canvas of order disrupted. The poison, it is not merely a weapon, but a signature. We must seek the artist who painted this scene." Japp, his overcoat damp from the morning's drizzle, rubbed his chin. "Artist, you say? I'd settle for a plain old murderer. This curare business, nasty stuff. Not your everyday poison. Whoever did this knew their chemistry." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching as he knelt beside the workbench. His gloved fingers hovered over a torn scrap of crimson velvet, no larger than a sovereign, lying in the dust. Its rich hue stood out starkly against the workshop's muted palette of gray stone and polished metal. "This fabric, it is not of this place. It speaks of elegance, of intention. And these footprints," he gestured to a trail of muddied marks, indistinct and overlapping, leading from the workshop's oak door to the workbench. "They suggest haste, or perhaps a masquerade." The footprints were a puzzle in themselves. Smeared by the damp flagstones, they bore the faint outline of a man's boot, yet their edges blurred into ambiguity, as though the intruder had sought to obscure their path. Poirot traced their arc with his cane, noting where they vanished near a rack, though to speak, then closing tightly. The silence was telling, a pause that spoke of years spent in the shadow of genius, of ambition stifled by the relentless tick of her husband's obsession. Psychologically, she was a woman of suppressed fire, her elegance a veneer over a reservoir of unvoiced desires. Had those desires, Poirot wondered, curdled into something darker? Jack Hargrove lingered near the workbench, his lanky frame slouched against a shelf of gears. His dark hair fell untidily over his brow, and his eyes, burning with a quiet intensity, darted between Poirot and the covered body. His hands, roughened by years of labor, clutched a screwdriver, its tip worn from countless hours under Thorne's exacting demands. "He was a hard man," Jack said unprompted, his voice low and edged with bitterness. "Promised me a partnership, but all I got was orders and scorn. I found him, you know. Dead, just like that. Nearly made my heart stop." Poirot tilted his head, studying the youth. Jack's psychological profile was a tangle of resentment and thwarted ambition. A young man whose dreams of rising above his station had been ground down by Thorne's autocratic rule. "Monsieur Hargrove," Poirot said, "you are here, in the tower, at the hour of the crime. What did you hear, precisely?" Jack shifted, his boots scuffing the floor. "The cry, sir. Sharp, like he was choking. I was in the attic, half asleep. Ran down soon as I heard it. Found him. Like that." His voice wavered, but his eyes held a defiance that intrigued Poirot. Was it fear, or something more calculated? The other suspects filtered into the workshop, drawn by the grim necessity of inquiry. Reginald Blackwood, the rival clockmaker, pushed through the door, his portly frame filling the space with an air of belligerent entitlement. His mutton-chop whiskers quivered as he spoke, his florid face flushed with indignation. "Thorne was a thief," he declared, his voice booming over the butler, moved with the precision of a metronome, his silver hair and impeccable livery a testament to decades of service. His lined face betrayed no emotion, but his hands, clasped tightly, hinted at a man whose stoicism was a fragile shell. "I served Master Thorne faithfully," he said, his voice a measured monotone. "He was a man of exacting standards." Psychologically, Simmons was a study in repressed loyalty, his devotion to the Thorne family frayed by years of being overlooked. Could that loyalty have snapped? Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the scene. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit gave her an air of intellectual authority, but her piercing blue eyes suggested a smoldering grievance. "Thorne and my father were colleagues, once," she said coolly to Poirot, "until he claimed my father's invention as his own. It ruined us." Her psychological profile was one of controlled rage, her intellect a weapon she wielded with surgical precision. Had that precision extended to murder? Poirot's cane tapped rhythmically as he circled the workbench, his mind a whirl of connections. The crimson fabric intrigued him. Its texture suggested a lady's gown, perhaps Amelia's or Eliza's, yet its placement felt staged. The footprints, too, were problematic. Their smudged outlines suggested deliberate obfuscation. A vial of curare residue, discarded carelessly in the dustbin, bore smudged fingerprints, unreadable but suggestive of haste. And then there was the pocket watch, stopped 2 minutes before the tower's bell. A discrepancy or a deliberate act? "Madame Thorne," Poirot said, turning to Amelia. "You were in your boudoir last night, oui? At what hour did you retire?" Amelia's eyes flickered. "By 10, monsieur. I took a draught to sleep. The tower's ticking. It haunts my dreams." Her hesitation was a crack in her composure, a glimpse of something unspoken. Poirot noted it, as he noted Jack's nervous fidgeting, Blackwood's belligerent scowl, Eliza's evasive glance. Answers, but they were locked in a mechanism only Poirot's little gray cells could unwind. As the suspects dispersed, their footsteps echoing on the flagstones, the detective stood alone, his gaze fixed on the stopped watch. Time, he knew, was both ally and adversary in this sinister dance. Chapter 3. The Rival's Grudge. The village of Clockhaven, shrouded in the persistent drizzle of an autumn morning in 1928, seemed to huddle closer to the earth, as if seeking refuge from the secrets that stirred within its ancient lanes. The clockmaker's tower loomed over the cobblestone streets, its spire a dark silhouette against the leaden sky, its great bell silent now, but resonant with the memory of midnight's toll. Beyond the tower's shadow, the ticking Hare Inn offered a flicker of warmth, its oak-beamed ceilings and crackling hearth a stark contrast to the chill of Elias Thorne's workshop. Here, amidst the scent of ale and wood smoke, Hercule Poirot sought to unravel the threads of motive and malice that bound the suspects to the clockmaker's murder. The inn's common room was a study in contrasts, rough-hewn tables crowded with villagers whispering of the tragedy, their voices a low hum beneath the clink of tankards, while the gas lamps cast dancing shadows that seemed to mimic the deceit Poirot sensed in the air. He sat at a corner table, his tailored suit immaculate despite the damp, his mustache quivering as he sipped a tisane, his green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker's loupe. Inspector Japp, his overcoat slung over a chair, leaned forward, his bluff features creased with impatience. "This lot's a tangle, Poirot," he muttered. "Everyone's got a reason to hate Thorne, but poison in a clock? That's a devil's trick." "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a melodic blend of Belgian cadence and formal English. "The trick, it is not merely in the method, but in the mind that conceived it. We must listen to the echoes of their hearts." His gaze drifted to the suspects, who had gathered reluctantly at the inn, summoned by Japp's insistence. Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the tremor in Blackwood's hand as he set down his tankard. "Monsieur Blackwood," he said, his tone deceptively mild. "You were at this very inn last night, oui? Until what hour did you remain?" Blackwood's scowl deepened, his whiskers quivering. "Till 11, maybe half past. Had a pint or two, then went home. Ask the barman." But his eyes darted to the side, a telltale flicker of unease. Poirot's little gray cells registered the inconsistency. A villager had seen Blackwood near the tower at 11:30, his heavy tread unmistakable in the mud. Was it confrontation, or something more sinister? Eliza Thorne, the victim's daughter, sat by the hearth, her auburn curls catching the firelight like a halo. At 19, her delicate features and emerald eyes suggested a fragile innocence, but her posture, shoulders hunched, fingers twisting a ribbon, betrayed a soul at odds with itself. Her psychological profile revealed a young woman caught between filial duty and a burning desire for freedom, her heart pledged to a London artist her father had deemed unworthy. "Father was so unyielding," she said softly to Poirot, her voice trembling like a plucked string. "He forbade me to see Julian, my painter. Said he'd disinherit me if I defied him. I loved father, but I hated his control." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but Poirot noted a fleeting hardness, a spark of rebellion, or perhaps guilt. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you were in your room last night, oui? Did you hear the cry that Monsieur Hargrove described?" Eliza hesitated, her fingers tightening on the ribbon. I was asleep. The tower's noises, they blend into dreams. But I woke when Jack shouted, after he found father." Her words were plausible, yet her gaze slid away, as though guarding a secret too heavy to bear. Amelia Thorne, the widow, stood near a window, her mourning black absorbing the dim light filtering through the rain. Poirot thought, like a rehearsed line in a play. Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, lingered near the bar, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning with a mix of defiance and unease. His calloused hands fidgeted with a pocket knife, its blade catching the lamplight. Psychologically, he was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams of partnership crushed by Thorne's relentless criticism. "I told you I was in the attic," he said to Poirot, his voice rough. "Heard the cry, ran down, found him dead. That's all I know." But his eyes darted to Eliza, a fleeting glance that spoke of shared secrets or shared guilt. Mr. Simmons, the butler, stood by the door, his silver hair and impeccable livery a testament to his role as the Thorne household's silent sentinel. His lined face was impassive, but his clasped hands betrayed a quiet tension. Psychologically, he was a man of repressed loyalty, his devotion frayed by years of being treated as invisible. "I was in the kitchen, preparing the morning's bread," he said, his voice a monotone. "I heard nothing until Master Hargrove raised the alarm." His stoicism was flawless, yet Poirot sensed a depth of feeling beneath the surface, a loyalty stretched to its limit. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, sat apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she observed the room with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit gave her an air of intellectual authority, but her piercing blue eyes hinted at a smoldering grievance. "Thorne's actions cost my family everything," she said coolly to Poirot. "My father's invention, a chronometric regulator, was stolen by him. It drove father to ruin. Revenge? A tempting thought, but I am a woman of reason." Her psychological profile was one of controlled fury, her intellect a blade honed by years of bitterness. Had that blade been wielded in the workshop? Poirot's cane tapped rhythmically against the inn's worn floorboards, each tap a metronome measuring the pulse of the mystery. The clues from Blackwood's scowl, Eliza's trembling lips, Amelia's rigid composure, Jack's clenched fists, Simmons' impassive mask, Lavinia's cool stare. The hearth crackled, its warmth unable to dispel the chill of suspicion. Outside, the drizzle continued, wrapping Clockhaven in a shroud of gray, while the tower's shadow seemed to stretch longer, its secrets ticking ever closer to revelation. Poirot returned to his tisane, his mind a whirl of connections. The crimson fabric. Did it belong to Amelia or Eliza? Or was it planted to mislead? The footprints. Blackwood's heavy boots could match, but so could Jack's. The curare. Lavinia's chemical knowledge made her a candidate, but the vial's careless disposal suggested haste, not precision. And the watch's stopped hands. Had someone tampered with time itself? As the inn's patrons resumed their whispers, Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle as intricate as Thorne's finest clock. The ticking hair, with its flickering shadows and unspoken truths, was but a stage in this drama of deception. And the next act, Poirot knew, would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 4. The Butler's Secret. The drizzle over Clockhaven had thickened into a steady rain by mid-morning, its relentless patter drumming against the leaded windows of the Clockmaker's tower. The village, nestled in the misty hills of 1928 England, seemed to shrink beneath the weight of the gray sky, its cobblestone streets slick and treacherous underfoot. Within the tower, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and polished brass. But the workshop's mechanical heartbeat, its ceaseless ticking, now carried a mournful undertone, as though the clocks themselves sensed the void left by Elias Thorne's death. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure a beacon of order amidst the chaos of murder, moved through the tower's lower levels with a purposeful grace, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the flagstones as he descended to the servants' quarters. These back betrayed a faint tremor, a crack in the facade of a man who had served the Thorne family for 3 decades. Psychologically, Simmons was a study in repressed loyalty, his devotion stretched taut by years of being treated as a mere cog in the household's machinery. Poirot, his green eyes sharp as cut glass, observed the butler with the intensity of a watchmaker examining a sprung gear. "Monsieur Simmons," Poirot began, his voice a melodic blend of Belgian cadence and formal English. "You are the silent heart of this tower, oui? You see all, hear all, yet speak little. Tell me, what did you see on the night of Monsieur Thorne's demise?" Simmons' posture stiffened, his voice a measured monotone. "I was in the kitchen, sir, preparing the morning's bread. I heard nothing until Master Hargrove raised the alarm, after he found the master dead." His words were precise, rehearsed, yet Poirot noted the slight tightening of his jaw, a telltale sign of truths withheld. The detective paced the narrow room, his cane tapping softly, each step a metronome measuring the pulse of the mystery. The servants' quarters were sparse. A cot, a small chest, a shelf holding a few personal effects, a worn Bible, a tarnished pocket watch, a photograph of a younger Simmons with a woman, perhaps a sister, long gone. But it was the chest that drew Poirot's attention. Its lock was scratched, as though recently forced, and a faint smear of ink stained its lid. With Simmons' reluctant permission, Poirot opened it, revealing a hidden ledger tucked beneath a pile of linens. The ledger, its pages yellowed and cramped with meticulous figures, was a record of petty thefts, small sums siphoned from Thorne's coffers over years. Entries noted payments to a chemist in a neighboring town, hinting at debts, or perhaps something more sinister. Poirot's mustache twitched as he turned to Simmons. "Monsieur, this ledger, it tells a story of betrayal. Why did you take from your master?" Simmons' composure cracked, his voice low with shame. "I served faithfully for decades, sir, but Master Thorne paid poorly. My sister..." Herring, or a cunning misdirection? Poirot's investigation shifted to the other suspects, who had gathered in the tower's parlor, a room as somber as the occasion. Amelia Thorne sat by a rain-streaked window, her morning black absorbing the dim light, her chestnut curls pinned tightly. Her hazel eyes flickered with unease, her psychological profile one of stifled ambition, her elegance a mask for years of frustration. "I knew nothing of Simmons' thefts," she said to Poirot, her voice cold. "Elias handled the finances. I was merely his wife." But her fingers, clutching her handkerchief, trembled, a sign of secrets held close. Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, slouched in a corner, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes darting between the others. His psychological profile was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams crushed by Thorne's tyranny. "Simmons was always skulking about," he muttered to Poirot. "Never trusted him. Always too quiet, like he was hiding something." His words were laced with accusation, but Poirot noted a glance toward Eliza, a fleeting intimacy that suggested shared confidences. Eliza Thorne, seated on a velvet chaise, twisted a ribbon in her hands, her auburn curls framing a face of delicate beauty. Her emerald eyes, though red-rimmed, held a guarded secrecy. Her psychological profile one of rebellion against her father's control. "Simmons was kind to me," she said softly. "He'd bring me tea when father was harsh. I can't believe he'd kill." Her voice faltered, but her gaze slid away, as though shielding a truth too heavy to share. Reginald Blackwood, the rival clockmaker, paced the parlor, his portly frame and mutton-chop whiskers filling the space with restless energy. His psychological profile was one of festering envy, his bluster a mask for inadequacy. "Simmons? A thief, you say?" he scoffed. "Thorne deserved worse than theft for what he did to me. Stole my designs, ruined my name." His alibi, already weakened by the barman's testimony, grew shakier as Poirot noted mud on his boots. The footprints in the garden suggested a deliberate act. But whose? The crimson velvet scrap, the stopped watch, the curare vial, all pointed to a mind that planned with precision, yet left clues that seemed almost careless. Was Simmons, with his quiet access to the tower, the architect of this crime, or a convenient scapegoat? "Monsieur Simmons," Poirot said, returning to the butler. "You had access to the workshop, oui? Did you ever handle the master's tools? His clocks?" Simmons shook his head, his voice steady. "Only to clean, sir. I never touched his mechanisms. They were his domain." But his eyes flickered, a momentary lapse that Poirot filed away. The detective's thoughts turned to the tower's timeline. Thorne dined alone at 10 p.m., worked until midnight. Simmons claimed to be in the kitchen, Amelia in her boudoir, Jack in the attic, Eliza in her room, Blackwood at the inn, Lavinia at the guest house. Yet Jack's claim of hearing the cry at 11:55 contradicted the bell's midnight toll. And Blackwood's presence near the tower at 11:30 muddied the waters. Amelia's sleeping draught, Eliza's evasiveness, Lavinia's chemical knowledge. All were gears in a mechanism Poirot had yet to align. "Mes amis," Poirot said, addressing the parlor's tense assembly. "This crime is a clockwork of shadows, each clue a gear that turns another. The butler's secret, it is but one piece. Hercule Poirot will find the spring that sets this mechanism in motion." The rain drummed on, the tower's clocks ticking relentlessly, their rhythm a counterpoint to the gathering suspicion. The parlor, with its heavy air and guarded glances, was a stage for deception, and Poirot knew the next clue would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery, or deeper into its shadows. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Past. The rain that cloaked Clockhaven in the autumn of 1928 had grown into a tempest, its gusts rattling the leaded windows of the clockmaker's tower as though the elements themselves sought to unearth its secrets. The tower, a Gothic sentinel rising from the village's misty heart, stood resolute, its great bell silent but heavy with the memory of midnight's fateful toll. Within its stone walls, the workshop of Elias Thorne remained a shrine to his mechanical genius, its ticking clocks a relentless chorus that seemed to mock the stillness of death. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure a beacon of precision amidst the storm's chaos, moved through the tower with a quiet intensity, his cane tapping a steady rhythm as he sought to unravel the threads of time and motive that wove this sinister tapestry. The parlor, where the suspects had gathered earlier, was now empty, its heavy air lingering with the ghosts of their guarded words. Poirot had retreated to the tower's library, a cramped chamber above the workshop, its shelves sagging under leather-bound tomes and yellowed ledgers. The scent of aged paper and damp stone mingled with the faint tang of coal from a smoldering hearth, its embers casting a feeble glow across the room. Here, amidst the detritus of Thorne's intellectual life, Poirot sought to piece together the timeline of the murder, a puzzle as intricate as the clockmaker's mechanisms. The detective's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, scanned a ledger of Thorne's appointments, its entries meticulous yet revealing. On the night of his death, Thorne had dined alone at 10 p.m., a solitary meal of cold mutton and claret, served by Simmons in the dining room. By 10:30 he had returned to his workshop, his habit of late-night tinkering well known. The cry, described by Jack Hargrove as a guttural gasp, had pierced the night at 11:55, according to the apprentice. Yet the tower's great bell tolled midnight, a discrepancy that gnawed at Poirot's little gray cells. The pocket watch, stopped at 11:58, added in the past. It whispers louder than the present. This letter, it is a gear that turns the mechanism of motive. He tucked the letter into his pocket, his mind whirling with possibilities. Had Thorne's attempt at atonement provoked Lavinia's wrath, or was it a red herring planted to mislead? The suspects, summoned once more to the tower's parlor, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a chandelier. Amelia Thorne, the widow, perched on a velvet chaise, her mourning black absorbing the glow, her chestnut curls pinned tightly. Her hazel eyes, usually composed, flickered with a suppressed agitation, her psychological profile one of stifled ambition, now tinged with relief. Elias rarely spoke of his past, she said to Poirot, her voice cold but unsteady. He was consumed by his work. I knew nothing of this letter. Her fingers clutching her lace handkerchief betrayed a tremor, a crack in her carefully constructed facade. Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. Madame, you retired at 10, oui? Yet the tower's noises, they are not easily ignored. Did you, perhaps, hear the cry that Monsieur Hargrove described? Amelia's lips parted, then closed tightly. I told you, monsieur. I took a sleeping draught. The clocks, they fade into dreams. Her words were plausible, but her hesitation suggested a truth held back, a secret ticking like a hidden spring. Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, leaned against the parlor's oak-paneled wall, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning with unease. His psychological profile was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams of partnership crushed by Thorne's autocratic rule. I heard the cry clear as day, he said, his voice rough. It was 11:55, I'd swear it. I was half asleep in the attic, but it woke me like a shot. Ran down and found him. Dead. His gaze flicked to Eliza, a fleeting intimacy that Poirot noted, a shared secret or shared guilt. Eliza Thorne, seated by the hearth, twisted a ribbon in her hands. Departure grew shakier as Poirot noted a nervous tick in his jaw, a sign of guilt or merely frustration. Mr. Simmons, the butler, stood by the door, his silver hair and impeccable livery a testament to his role as the household's silent sentinel. His psychological profile revealed a man of repressed loyalty, his devotion frayed by years of ingratitude. I knew nothing of any letter, he said, his voice a monotone. I was in the kitchen, as I told you, until the alarm was raised. But his hands, clasped tightly, betrayed a quiet tension, and Poirot recalled the ledger's damning entries. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood by a window, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the room with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit belied a smoldering grievance. Her psychological profile one of controlled fury over Thorne's plagiarism. "That letter changes nothing," she said coolly to Poirot. "Thorne's apology is too late. My father's ruin was his doing, and no words can undo that." Her composure was a blade, but Poirot wondered if it concealed a deeper intent. The detective's cane tapped rhythmically as he circled the parlor, his mind a whirl of connections. The letter was a tantalizing clue, suggesting Thorne's awareness of past wrongs. But its presence in the library unsent raised questions. Had Lavinia seen it, or was it planted to implicate her? The timeline inconsistencies gnawed at him. Jack's cry at 11:55. The watch stopped at 11:58. The bell at midnight. The crimson velvet scrap. The smeared footprints. The curare vial. All pointed to a mind that planned with precision, yet left clues that seemed almost careless. "Monsieur Hargrove," Poirot said, turning to the apprentice. "You are certain of the time? 11:55, you say, yet the bell tolled later. Could your ears have deceived you?" Jack's jaw tightened. "I know what I heard, sir. It was 11:55, clear as anything." His defiance was convincing, but Poirot's glances was a stage for secrets, and Poirot knew the next clue would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery, or deeper into its labyrinth. Chapter 6. The Crimson Clue. The storm that enveloped Clockhaven in the autumn of 1928 raged on, its howling winds battering the clockmaker's tower, as though demanding entry to its secrets. The tower, a brooding sentinel of weathered stone, stood resolute, its spire piercing the roiling clouds, while the great bell within remained silent, its last toll at midnight, a haunting echo of Elias Thorne's final moments. Inside, the workshop's mechanical heartbeat pulsed through the air, the ticking of countless clocks a relentless reminder of time's unyielding march. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure a beacon of order amidst the tempest's chaos, stood at the center of the workshop, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man unraveling a puzzle as intricate as the mechanisms surrounding him. The gas lamp above Thorne's workbench cast a wavering glow, illuminating the scene of the crime. The clockmaker's body, now removed, had left behind a ghost of its presence, a faint outline in the dust. The ornate pocket watch stopped at 11:58, and the glitter of curare residue on its brass hands. The crimson velvet scrap, discovered near the body, lay on the workbench, its rich hue a stark contrast to the muted tones of brass and stone. Poirot's gloved fingers hovered over it, his mustache twitching as he considered its significance. Was it a careless remnant of the killer's attire, or a deliberate plant to mislead? "Mon ami," Poirot murmured to himself, his voice a melodic whisper. "This fabric, it is a thread in the tapestry of deception. But whose hand wove it into this scene?" He produced a magnifying glass, its lens catching the lamplight as he examined the velvet closely. The fibers were fine, suggesting a garment of quality, perhaps a lady's gown, but a single thread, pale and coarse, clung to its edge, the oak door and the rustle of damp cloaks. Amelia Thorne entered first, her morning black absorbing the lamplight, her chestnut curls pinned tightly beneath a widow's veil. Her hazel eyes, usually composed, flickered with unease. Her psychological profile one of stifled ambition, now laced with a subtle relief. "That fabric?" she said, her voice cold but unsteady as Poirot held it up. "It resembles my evening gown, but it was stolen from my wardrobe weeks ago. I thought it lost." Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her veil, a gesture Poirot noted. A crack in her facade, or a performance? Eliza Thorne followed, her auburn curls catching the light, her emerald eyes red-rimmed but guarded. At 19, her delicate beauty masked a rebellious spirit, her psychological profile one of defiance against her father's control. "It could be mine," she admitted, her voice trembling like a plucked string. "I had a velvet dress, crimson for a ball last month. But I tore it dancing and the seamstress took it to mend." Her gaze darted to Jack Hargrove, a fleeting intimacy that suggested shared secrets or shared guilt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mademoiselle, this tear, it is fresh. The fibers, they are not frayed as one would expect from a ball. Tell me, where was this dress last night?" Eliza's hands twisted a ribbon, her voice faltering. "In my room, I think. I haven't worn it since. I don't know." Her evasiveness was a red herring, Poirot thought, or perhaps a truth too dangerous to voice. Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, lingered near the workbench, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning with unease. His psychological profile was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams crushed by Thorne's tyranny. "I don't know nothing about dresses," he muttered, his calloused hands fidgeting with a screwdriver. "But if Eliza says it's hers, maybe someone took it to frame her." His defense of her was swift, almost too swift, and Poirot noted the glass me from the ladies' wardrobes. But his clasped hands betrayed a quiet tension, and Poirot recalled the ledger's damning entries, petty thefts, but enough to motive a desperate act. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit belied a smoldering grievance, her psychological profile one of controlled fury over Thorne's plagiarism. "Velvet is irrelevant," she said coolly. "Thorne's crimes were of the mind, not of fabric. His apology, that letter you found, it means nothing. Too late for justice." Her composure was a blade, but Poirot wondered if it concealed a deeper intent. The detective knelt beside the workbench, his magnifying glass tracing the velvet's edges. The pale thread, coarse and out of place, suggested a different fabric, perhaps a lining or a deliberate plant. He rose, his cane tapping as he circled the suspects. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the workshop's ticking. "This crimson clue, it is a mirror reflecting the heart of the killer. It speaks of elegance, of intention, but also of deception. Who among you would weave such a thread?" The suspects stirred, their faces a gallery of unease. Amelia's trembling fingers, Eliza's evasive glance, Jack's clenched fists, Blackwood's nervous tick, Simmons' rigid posture, Lavinia's cool stare. The storm outside roared, its thunder a counterpoint to the tension within. Poirot's mind whirled with connections. The crimson scrap, possibly stolen. The footprints leading nowhere. The curare, requiring chemical knowledge. The stopped watch defying the bell's toll. The unsent letter hinting at past sins. A new clue emerged as Poirot examined the workbench. A faint smear of wax, barely visible, near the pocket watch. It suggested a candle, perhaps suggested a nocturnal act. But whose? The curare required expertise, implicating Lavinia, yet the vial's careless disposal suggested haste. And the watch. Had someone stopped it to confuse the timeline? Mes amis, Poirot said, his voice rising above the storm. This clue, it is a whisper of the killer's hand. But the hand, it hides behind a veil of lies. Hercule Poirot will tear that veil asunder. The workshop's clocks ticked on, their rhythm a relentless counterpoint to the gathering suspicion. The crimson scrap, like a drop of blood in the dust, held the key. But to which heart? As the storm raged outside, the tower's secrets seemed to tighten, their gears grinding ever closer to revelation, or deeper into deception. Chapter 7. Ticking Suspicions. The storm that gripped Clockhaven in the autumn of 1928 had settled into a brooding drizzle, its ceaseless patter a mournful cadence against the clockmaker's tower. The tower, a Gothic monument of weathered stone, stood as a silent guardian over the village, its spire shrouded in mist, its great bell dormant since the fateful midnight toll that marked Elias Thorne's demise. Within the workshop, the relentless ticking of clocks filled the air with a mechanical pulse, each tick a reminder of time's unyielding march and the secrets it concealed. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure a beacon of precision amidst the gloom, stood at the heart of the workshop, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man whose little gray cells were piecing together a puzzle as intricate as Thorne's finest timepiece. The gas lamp above the workbench cast a wavering glow, illuminating the remnants of the crime. The faint outline where Thorne's body had lain, the pocket watch frozen at 11:58, its brass hands dusted with curare's deadly residue, and the crimson velvet scrap, its rich hue a stark accusation in the dust. Nearby, the smeared footprints led to the garden, a trail that ended in ambiguity, while the curare vial in the dustbin bore smudged fingerprints. A careless clue, or a deliberate one. "Here's another twist, Poirot," he said, rubbing his chin. "Points to the girl, but it's too neat, like that velvet. Someone's playing us for fools." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching. "The fool, he is not Hercule Poirot. This hair, it is a clue that points, but where? We must gather the threads of motive and opportunity." He summoned the suspects to the workshop, their arrival marked by the creak of the oak door and the rustle of rain-soaked cloaks, their faces a gallery of unease under the ticking clock's relentless scrutiny. Amelia Thorne stood near the workbench, her mourning black absorbing the lamplight, her chestnut curls pinned tightly beneath a widow's veil. Her hazel eyes flickered with a suppressed agitation, her psychological profile one of stifled ambition, now tinged with relief, as though Thorne's death had lifted a weight. "That hair?" she said, her voice cold but unsteady as Poirot held it up in a small glass vial. "It could be Eliza's, but she's not so careless. Someone must have placed it here." Her fingers, clutching her lace handkerchief, trembled. A crack in her composure? or a calculated performance. Eliza Thorne, seated on a stool, twisted a ribbon in her hands, her auburn curls catching the light, her emerald eyes red-rimmed but guarded. Her psychological profile was one of rebellion, her heart straining against her father's control over her forbidden love. "It's not mine," she said, her voice trembling like a plucked string. "My hair's natural, not dyed. I haven't been near the workbench since Father forbade me." Her gaze darted to Jack Hargrove, a fleeting intimacy that Poirot noted. A shared secret or shared guilt? Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, leaned against a shelf of gears, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning with defiance. His psychological profile was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams crushed by Thorne's tyranny. "Eliza's telling the truth," he said, his voice rough. "Someone's trying to pin this on her. I'd bet it's Blackwood. He was skulking around the tower." Psychological profile revealed a man of repressed loyalty, his devotion frayed by years of ingratitude, as evidenced by the ledger of petty thefts. "I know nothing of this hair, sir," he said, his voice a monotone. "My duties keep me from the workshop's clutter." But his clasped hands betrayed a quiet tension, and Poirot recalled the mud on his boots, matching the smeared footprints, a clue that led nowhere, or everywhere. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit belied a smoldering grievance, her psychological profile one of controlled fury over Thorne's plagiarism. "A dyed hair," she said coolly. A crude attempt at misdirection. Thorne's death was no accident. It was planned, and I'd wager by someone close to him. Her composure was a blade, but Poirot wondered if her chemical knowledge, hinted at by the curare, made her a prime suspect. The detective circled the workbench, his cane tapping faster, his mind a whirl of connections. The auburn hair was a pivot, pointing to Eliza, or framing her. The crimson velvet scrap, possibly stolen from Amelia or Eliza, suggested a woman's involvement. Yet the coarse thread within it hinted at another source. The wax smear, the smeared footprints, the curare vial, the unsent letter to Lavinia, all were gears in a mechanism of deception. But the timeline remained elusive. Thorne dined at 10 p.m., worked until midnight. Jack's cry at 11:55, the watch at 11:58, the bell at midnight. Amelia's sleeping draught, Eliza's torn dress, Blackwood's late-night visit, Simmons' thefts, Lavinia's grudge, all spun in Poirot's mind like a misaligned clock. "Mademoiselle Eliza," Poirot said, turning to the daughter. "This hair, it resembles yours, yet it is dyed. Have you enemies who would seek to implicate you?" Eliza's hands tightened on the ribbon, her voice faltering. I don't know." Smear. It was angular, as though a tool or a ring had grazed the wood. He recalled Amelia's sapphire ring, its sharp setting capable of such a mark. Had she been at the workbench, despite her claim of a sleeping draught? Or was it another planted clue? "Madame Thorne," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the ticking. "You wear a ring, oui? A sapphire, with a sharp edge. Might it have left a mark on this workbench?" Amelia's hand instinctively covered her ring, her voice unsteady. I rarely come here. Elias forbade it. That mark could be anyone's." Her hesitation was a crack, and Poirot filed it away. The workshop's clocks ticked on, their rhythm a counterpoint to the gathering suspicion. The suspects' faces, Amelia's trembling fingers, Eliza's guarded eyes, Jack's clenched fists, Blackwood's scowl, Simmons' rigid posture, Lavinia's cool stare, were a gallery of secrets, each tick bringing Poirot closer to the truth, or deeper into deception. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice rising above the drizzle's patter. "This hair, this scratch, they are threads in a web of lies. The killer, he plays a game of shadows, but Hercule Poirot, he sees through the darkness. The truth, it ticks closer with every moment." The tower's gloom deepened, the drizzle a relentless shroud over Clockhaven. The auburn hair, like the crimson scrap before it, was a clue that pointed and misled, a gear in a mechanism of murder that Poirot was determined to unwind. Chapter 8. The Poisoned Mechanism. The drizzle that cloaked Clockhaven in the autumn of 1928 had settled into a persistent mist, veiling the village in a ghostly shroud that seemed to mirror the secrets festering within the Clockmaker's tower. The tower itself, a Gothic edifice of weathered stone, stood resolute, its spire piercing the low clouds like a needle stitching the fabric of time. Inside, the workshop of Elias Thorne thrummed with the relentless ticking of clocks, their mechanical heartbeat, a voice a melodic whisper. This clock, it is not merely a victim, but a witness. Its workings, they hold the secret of the killer's hand. He produced a jeweler's loop, its lens catching the lamplight as he leaned over the workbench, examining the clock's exposed innards. A labyrinth of gears, springs, and levers, each polished to a mirror-like sheen. The clock, a prototype for a new chronometer, was a marvel of precision. But Poirot's scrutiny revealed a hidden anomaly. A tiny needle, no thicker than a hair, embedded in the escapement. Its tip, barely visible, glistened with a residue that matched the curare on the pocket watch. Inspector Japp, his overcoat damp from the mist, stood nearby, his bluff features creased with astonishment. "A needle in the clock, Poirot. That's devilish clever. Whoever rigged this knew their way around Thorne's gadgets." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching as he straightened. "This needle, it is the heart of the murder, a mechanism wound to kill at the stroke of midnight. But who had the skill, the access, to set such a trap?" His cane tapped rhythmically against the flagstones, each tap a metronome measuring the pulse of suspicion. The suspects, summoned once more to the workshop, gathered in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the flickering lamplight. Amelia Thorne stood near the workbench, her mourning black absorbing the glow, her chestnut curls pinned tightly beneath a widow's veil. Her hazel eyes flickered with unease, her psychological profile one of stifled ambition now laced with a subtle relief. "That needle?" she said, her voice cold but unsteady as Poirot described the discovery. "Elias was always tinkering. Perhaps it was an accident, a flaw in his design." Her fingers, clutching her lace handkerchief, trembled. A crack in her composure, or a calculated deflection? Eliza Thorne, seated on a stool, twisted a ribbon in her hands, her auburn curls catching the light, her emerald eyes red-rimmed but guarded. Her psychological energy. His psychological profile was one of festering envy, his bluster a mask for inadequacy. "A needle in the escapement?" he scoffed. "Thorne's work was flawless, I'll give him that. But I wouldn't put it past him to booby-trap his own designs to keep them from me." His alibi, weakened by his late-night presence near the tower, grew shakier as Poirot noted mud on his boots, similar to the workshop's footprints, but too common to be conclusive. Mr. Simmons, the butler, stood rigidly, his silver hair and impeccable livery a testament to his role as the household's silent sentinel. His psychological profile revealed a man of repressed loyalty, his devotion frayed by years of ingratitude, as evidenced by the ledger of petty thefts. "I never touched the master's clock, sir," he said, his voice a monotone. "My duties were elsewhere," but his clasped hands betrayed a quiet tension, and Poirot recalled the mud on his boots, a clue that led nowhere, or everywhere. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit belied a smoldering grievance, her psychological profile one of controlled fury over Thorne's plagiarism. "Curare requires knowledge," she said coolly. "I'm a doctor, yes, but I'd not waste such a poison on a clock. Too imprecise." Her composure was a blade, but Poirot wondered if her chemical expertise made her the architect of this deadly mechanism. The detective knelt beside the workbench, his loupe tracing the needle's path. It was cunningly placed, triggered by the clock's midnight chime to prick Thorne's finger as he adjusted the escapement. The curare, fast-acting, ensured death within minutes, mimicking a natural apoplexy. But who had access to the clock? Jack, as apprentice, knew its workings intimately. Blackwood, a rival, had the skill but not the opportunity. Lavinia's chemical knowledge pointed to her, yet her arrival after Thorne's dinner cast doubt. Amelia and Eliza, with access to the tower, lacked the technical expertise. 10:30. Carrying a small case. Had she lied, or was the villager mistaken? "Monsieur Hargrove," Poirot said, turning to the apprentice. "You worked on this clock with Monsieur Thorne. Did you ever see this needle, or notice anyone tampering with it?" Jack's jaw tightened. "Never saw it, sir. Thorne was secretive, kept the prototype locked away. Only he and I had keys." His defiance was convincing, but Poirot noted the glance toward Eliza. A silent pact, perhaps. The workshop's clocks ticked on, their rhythm a counterpoint to the gathering suspicion. The suspects' faces, Amelia's trembling fingers, Eliza's guarded eyes, Jack's clenched fists, Blackwood's scowl, Simmons's rigid posture, Lavinia's cool stare, were a gallery of secrets. The needle was a pivot, pointing to technical skill and chemical knowledge, but the timeline and motives remained misaligned. A new clue emerged as Poirot examined the clock's casing. A faint smudge of grease, not from Thorne's tools, but from a different source. Perhaps a glove, or a machine elsewhere. It suggested an outsider's touch, or a suspect's attempt to cover their tracks. Poirot's mind whirled with connections. The crimson scrap, possibly stolen. The dyed hair, pointing to Eliza. The scratched workbench, hinting at Amelia's ring. The curare, implicating Lavinia. The footprints, framing Simmons or Blackwood. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice rising above the ticking. "This needle, it is the heart of the crime. A mechanism of death wound by a cunning hand. But the hand, it hides behind a veil of lies. Hercule Poirot will find the spring that sets it ticking." The mist outside thickened, the tower's gloom deepening as the clocks ticked relentlessly. The needle, like the crimson scrap and dyed hair before it, was a clue that pointed and misled, a gear and a mechanism of murder that Poirot was determined to unwind. As the suspects dispersed, their footsteps echoing on the flagstones, the detective stood alone, his gaze murder. The gas lamp above Thorne's workbench cast a flickering glow, illuminating the relics of the crime. The faint outline where the clockmaker's body had lain, the pocket watch frozen at 11:58, its brass hands dusted with curare's deadly residue, and the crimson velvet scrap, its rich hue a persistent enigma. The smeared footprints, the curare vial, the wax smear, the dyed auburn hair, the scratched workbench, the hidden needle in the clock's escapement, all were gears in a mechanism of deceit, each turning closer to revelation. Poirot's mind, a finely tuned instrument, churned with these clues. But it was the unraveling of red herrings that now drove his investigation as the truth began to emerge from the fog of misdirection. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, his voice a melodic whisper. "The echoes of this crime, they are not of sound, but of deceit. The clues, they point and mislead, but the little gray cells, they see through the shadows." His cane tapped rhythmically against the flagstones, each tap a metronome measuring the pulse of suspicion as he paced the workshop, his thoughts weaving a tapestry from the fragments of evidence. Inspector Japp, his overcoat damp from the mist, stood by the door, his bluff features creased with exasperation. "These clues, Poirot, they're piling up like clock parts, but half of them seem planted. That hair, the velvet, the footprints, someone's been too clever by half." "Precisimo," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching. "The cleverness, it is their undoing. The killer weaves a web, but the threads they tangle. We must cut through to the heart." His gaze lingered on the workbench, where the dyed auburn hair and crimson velvet scrap lay side by side, their presence a deliberate taunt, or a careless mistake. The suspects, summoned once more to the workshop, gathered in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the flickering lamplight. Amelia Thorne stood near the workbench, her mourning black absorbing the glow, her chestnut curls pinned tightly beneath a widow's veil. Noted. A shared secret or shared guilt? Jack Hargrove, the apprentice, leaned against a shelf of gears, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning with defiance. His psychological profile was a cauldron of resentment, his dreams crushed by Thorne's tyranny. "Eliza's right," he said, his voice rough. "Someone's setting her up. Those footprints in the garden, I made 'em, I admit it. Kicked up the mud to throw off suspicion after I found the body. But I didn't kill him." His confession was a bombshell, unraveling one red herring. But his protectiveness of Eliza raised new questions. Reginald Blackwood, the rival clockmaker, stood by the door, his portly frame and mutton-chop whiskers exuding belligerent energy. His psychological profile was one of festering envy, his bluster a mask for inadequacy. "Footprints, hair, velvet, child's play," he scoffed. "Thorne's death was about his sins, not these parlor tricks. I was at the inn, as I said, but I'll not deny I hated him." His alibi, weakened by his late-night presence near the tower, grew shakier as Poirot noted a nervous tick in his jaw. A sign of guilt? Or frustration? Mr. Simmons, the butler, stood rigidly, his silver hair and impeccable livery a testament to his role as the household's silent sentinel. His psychological profile revealed a man of repressed loyalty, his devotion frayed by years of ingratitude, as evidenced by the ledger of petty thefts. "I know nothing of these clues, sir," he said, his voice a monotone. "My boots may match the mud, but I was in the kitchen, as I told you." His clasped hands betrayed a quiet tension, and Poirot recalled the ledger's entries. Petty thefts, but enough to motive a desperate act. Dr. Lavinia Croft, the scholarly visitor, stood apart, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as she surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. Her severe bun and tailored gray suit belied a smoldering grievance, her psychological profile one of controlled fury over Thorne's plagiarism. These clues workshop's floor. A faint smear of ash, barely visible near the hearth, suggesting a document burned in haste. He sifted through the ashes, finding fragments of paper with Thorne's handwriting, numbers, perhaps a code, or a draft of another letter. "This ash," Poirot said, holding up a charred scrap. "It is a whisper of destruction. Someone sought to erase the truth." "Madame Thorne," Poirot said, turning to Amelia. "You wear a sapphire ring, oui? Its sharp edge could scratch the workbench. Were you here, despite your sleeping draught?" Amelia's hand covered her ring, her voice unsteady. "I told you I rarely came here. Elias forbade it. That scratch could be anyone's." Her hesitation was a crack, and Poirot filed it away. "Mademoiselle Eliza," he said, turning to the daughter. "Your dress was stolen, you say, and your love for this painter. Did your father discover it?" Eliza's hands tightened on the ribbon, her voice faltering. He found a letter from Julian. He was furious, threatened to disinherit me. But I didn't kill him." Her gaze flicked to Jack, a silent plea. Jack stepped forward, his voice sharp. "She's telling the truth. Thorne caught us together a week ago. He said he'd ruin us both. But I didn't touch that clock." His confession revealed a hidden motive, a love affair, fueling desperation. The timeline gnawed at Poirot. Thorne dined at 10 p.m., worked until midnight. Jack's cry at 11:55, the watch at 11:58, the bell at midnight. Lavinia's sighting at 10:30, Blackwood's at 11:30. Amelia's sleeping draught, Simmons's kitchen duties, all were misaligned. The ash suggested a cover-up. But whose? "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice rising above the ticking. "These red herrings, footprints, hair, velvet, they are echoes of deception, designed to mislead. But the truth, it lies in the heart of this mechanism. Hercule Poirot will find the spring that sets it ticking." The center of the bell chamber, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man whose little gray cells had finally aligned the gears of this intricate puzzle. The chamber, a cavernous space of iron beams and stone arches, was lit by flickering torches, their light casting dancing shadows across the assembled suspects. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and damp stone, the great bell looming above like a judge awaiting its verdict. Poirot had summoned the suspects: Amelia Thorne, Eliza Thorne, Jack Hargrove, Reginald Blackwood, Mr. Simmons, and Dr. Lavinia Croft. To this dramatic stage, their faces a gallery of tension under the weight of impending revelation. Inspector Japp stood by the spiral staircase, his bluff features creased with anticipation, his overcoat still damp from the earlier mist. "This is it, Poirot," he muttered. "You've got that look. Who's the devil behind this?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a melodic blend of Belgian cadence and formal English. "The devil, he is clever, but not so clever as Hercule Poirot. This crime, it is a symphony of deception. But the little gray cells, they have found the melody." His cane tapped rhythmically against the stone floor, each tap a metronome marking the climax of the mystery. The clues, meticulously gathered, swirled in Poirot's mind. The crimson velvet scrap, suggesting a lady's gown. The smeared footprints, planted by Jack. The curare vial, pointing to chemical expertise. The dyed auburn hair, implicating Eliza. The wax smear and scratched workbench, hinting at Amelia. The hidden needle in the clock's escapement, a deadly trap. The unsent letter to Lavinia, revealing Thorne's guilt. The ash smear, suggesting a burned secret. The timeline, Thorne's dinner at 10 p.m., Jack's cry at 11:55. The watch stopped at 11:58. The bell at midnight. Had been a labyrinth, but Poirot had navigated its twists. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice rising above the "No?" Eliza's hands twisted a ribbon, her voice trembling. "He threatened to disinherit me, yes. But I didn't kill him." Her glance toward Jack Hargrove betrayed a shared secret. Her rebellion a potential spark for murder. Jack stepped forward, his lanky frame tense, his dark eyes burning. "She's innocent, sir. I planted those footprints to protect her. After I found Thorne dead, I didn't touch that clock." His confession, unraveling one red herring, revealed a motive. A desperate love affair with Eliza, threatened by Thorne's wrath. Reginald Blackwood, his portly frame and mutton-chop whiskers exuding belligerence, scoffed. "This is nonsense. Thorne stole my designs. I had reason to hate him. But I was at the inn." His alibi, weakened by his presence near the tower at 11:30, crumbled under Poirot's scrutiny. His envy a smoldering motive. Mr. Simmons, the butler, stood rigidly, his silver hair and impeccable livery masking a frayed loyalty. "I stole, yes, for my sister's medicine," he admitted, his voice a monotone. "But murder? Never." His boots matched the footprints, but their dead-end trail suggested misdirection. Dr. Lavinia Croft, her wire-rimmed spectacles glinting, stood apart, her severe bun and tailored suit belied by a smoldering grievance. "Thorne's letter was meaningless," she said coolly. "My knowledge of curare is academic, not criminal." Her sighting near the tower at 10:30 contradicted her timeline. Her fury a potent motive. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chamber. "Mes amis, the clues, they are a masquerade. The footprints a trick by Monsieur Hargrove, the hair dyed to implicate Mademoiselle Eliza, the velvet stolen to point to Madame Thorne, but the needle in the clock, the curare. These are the heart pocket watch to confuse the timeline. The velvet, torn from your gown in a fit of rage weeks ago, was planted to mislead. The hair, dyed and placed by you, pointed to Eliza, deflecting suspicion. But your composure, it cracks. Your relief, it betrays you." Amelia's hands trembled, her voice breaking. I couldn't bear it anymore. Elias was a tyrant, his clocks his only love. Reginald promised me a future, but Elias would never let me go. I used the curare, yes, from a chemist in London. I didn't mean for it to be so cruel. The chamber fell silent, the confession echoing like the bell's toll. Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Amelia Thorne, you're under arrest for the murder of Elias Thorne." Poirot's gaze softened, but his resolve was iron. "Madame, the heart, it seeks freedom. But the little gray cells, they seek justice. The truth, it ticks louder than any clock." The suspects dispersed, their footsteps echoing down the spiral staircase, leaving Poirot alone in the bell chamber. The torches flickered, casting shadows that danced like the ghosts of Thorne's clocks. The great bell loomed above, its silence a testament to the mystery's resolution. Outside, the mist had cleared, revealing Clockhaven's cobblestone lanes under a cold, clear sky. The tower, with its secrets laid bare, stood as a monument to time's unyielding truth. "Mes amis," Poirot said to the empty chamber, his voice a whisper. "The clockmaker wound the spring, but the killer released it. Hercule Poirot, he has stopped the mechanism of deceit." The workshop below ticked on, its clocks a chorus of order restored. The murder of Elias Thorne, a puzzle of passion and betrayal, had been solved, its echoes fading into the annals of Clockhaven's history. As Poirot descended the staircase, his cane tapping a final rhythm, he knew the little gray cells had triumphed once more, bringing light to the shadows of a sinister night.